Hello everybody, I'm Scotty from Scotties Clock World. Thanks for joining me back on my channel. I really appreciate it. Right, we're ready to remove the mainspring from the barrel that we took out of this clock. So the first thing we're going to do, we've got to remove that plate on the bottom. And the best way to do that is use a hammer and hit that piece there on the top. That lifts the cap off straight away. Before we can start taking the spring out, we need to find a sleeve that we can wrap around it that will contain the spring. That's too small. We need a slightly larger one than that. Have a look and see. That's better. We want to fit the sleeve inside the barrel but not have too much movement. So we'll use that one. Now put the arbor back into the barrel. Now, having selected our sleeve, this one here, we put it onto the spring winder and then put the winding arbor into the chuck on the spring winder and tighten it down. We'll put this piece here on the end, which just saves it wobbling round a bit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hold the barrel, wind the spring up, compress it, and then slide it across so that this slot here aligns with the lug inside the barrel there. So initially we hold the barrel in a pair of gloves and wind up the spring. You can feel it getting tighter, and then try to put the sleeve in. Not quite ready yet, a bit more. Not quite. There we go, that's the limit. Right, now have to get the sleeve to sit in. There we go, that's got him finally. Now reverse the flow on the winder, holding the barrel with our gloved hand. Now undo the spring winder, and that's what we've got. The spring is contained within the sleeve there. So what we do now, we put our other glove on. We're now going to unwind the spring in the barrel by turning the sleeve. And out it comes. There's the barrel empty. And the spring is contained within the sleeve. I'll pop that back on there, put it back on the winding arbor, back into there, put it back into the spring winder, tighten it down. Let's see what we've got here in the way of hooks. There we go. Now we want a hook to fit into that hole there on the end of the mainspring. Then we'll put the end of the clamp on to hold it in place. Once again, reverse the flow of the winder because we have to compress the spring a little bit so that we can slide the sleeve off. You heard it click then. There it is, slide the sleeve off. Reverse the flow of the winder And just keep your glove handy in case the spring slips. There it is. We've removed the spring from the barrel. We're now going to clean the spring and grease it and then put it aside. And once we've done the 3 of those, I'll put them into the ultrasonic cleaner and clean them because they haven't been cleaned yet in the last batch. And then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. We're ready to start cleaning the spring. But before we do, I forgot to show you this. When you buy your sleeves to fit your spring winder, you buy them in a group of about 6 or 7, I think I've got there. So you don't buy them one at a time, you buy them as a set, and they cover a great range of spring sizes. Tiny little ones for French clocks, for French clock mainsprings, and pretty decent sized chime mainspring sizes. Them aside. Now I'll put a little bit of kerosene, blue kerosene, into a dish, and we'll be using a little bit of scourer pad. Soak up a little bit of kero in that, we don't want very much. Put the lid back on it, let it run down throughout our scourer pad. And I've reversed the flow on the spring winder to hold it there in place so that we can pull the spring out on it. I've got a piece of newspaper here because we're going to drop bits of kerosene from the spring as we're cleaning it, and we don't want to ruin the carpet. Not if the wife's going to find out anyway. So we rub backwards and forwards on the spring. When you do this, make sure your spring winder's clamped down to the bench or it'll take off on you for sure. Then I just normally reverse the scouring pad when I get right to the top, and then working in reverse, rub the spring all the way down for the full length. It's a rather messy operation, but it has to be done. So first up, I'll take just a piece of old cloth, we'll clean it off. We'll finish off with a nice clean piece of cloth, but I'll just use an old one initially to remove the kerosene. Similar when we were cleaning the spring, we just wind it out and rub up and down with our piece of cloth as far as we can go. Turn it over and come back down again. That's the gunk we got off at that time. And now I've got a clean piece of cloth. Nice and clean, no marks on it. And we'll run up and down the spring once again to remove any kerosene that's still on it, because we need the spring to be dry before we can grease it. You can see it's got a little bit more off there, not much. We got most of it off with the other cloth, but this is the final clean, so we'll run it back again. Wiping it the full length, and that was the last little bit we got off. You can see there's not very much there. Alright, we're ready to start greasing the mainspring now. This is a grease we're going to use today, a PTFE grease. Very good for putting on springs, because if you use oil on springs, when the spring is compressed, it forces it out and it drips out all over the place into the base of your clock. And you don't want that, a little pool of oil in the base of your clock case. Right, how we do this, I use a toothpick, get some grease on it, and then starting on the inside as far as you can get into it, run some grease around one side of the mainspring only. You don't do both sides, because once the spring is compressed, then the grease will be forced onto the other side of the spring. So methodically work your way around, making sure you've got a liberal amount of grease on it, because once we compress the spring before we put it back, any excess grease will be forced out, and then we wipe that off before it goes back into the barrel. Takes a little bit of time, but doing it properly pays off in the long run. Down there. There, down there. And then on the outside of the largest coil. Just methodically working your way around, making sure you've got a thin layer of grease over the majority of the surface area of the coils. Oh, that looks pretty good. A little bit down in there that I missed. Seems to be reasonably even. Once we compress the spring, it'll solve any issues with small places that haven't got any grease on them. Alright, last thing we do now, and this is quite important, is we have one of those, a plastic bag with the train of the mainspring written on it. We put the spring into it and wrap it up like so it doesn't get any dust or anything else on it, and then when we're ready to put it back into the barrel, we know which is the strike side mainspring, and they both go back together.